Thank you, Sonam, for keeping within the time, firstly, and also for the great presentation. I think you summed up very well on starting on the climate change policies, and then on the challenges, and then climate change policies, objective, how it contributes to pillars of the gross national happiness. So I am, again, once again, really humbled to be moderating this, because I'm personally very impressed with the amount of resources and information that's coming from these three, distinguished panelists. So it is almost a crime to be, in between lunch and you. But I am sure, there are some burning questions that our participants would have. So without any further ado, I would want to open for Q&A. So if there's any questions, we're a little bit far from each other, so if you could raise your hand. And also, before question, please identify yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the very informative presentation. I'm Bill Berkwhite from the University of Pennsylvania Law School in the United States. And my question is, I'm wondering if you could share a little about how Bhutan is bringing the concept of gross national happiness in the climate space to the international stage. You've said a lot about what's happening here in Bhutan, but as someone who has, say, participated in many of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change negotiations, these ideas are completely absent, and I would love to see more of this thinking being brought into other countries' climate policy. And just wondering if there are ways that Bhutan is trying to share some of these ideas into the international institutional fora in the climate space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. So I will take 2 more questions and then let our panelists respond to those. May I have next question? I can't see if you could raise your hands. Okay, as our participants prepare their question, I would pass the floor to our panelists for this amazing question, which speaks about, we have such rich information and data, and the uniqueness of gross national happiness, and how are we actually taking this opportunity of taking from national to international forum and sharing our experiences. Dashu, would you like to take that?
Happiness. No. Thank you, Professor. I'm not part of the foreign ministry and know very little about action in the international sphere. However, distinctive thing about Bhutan, Bhutanese way of thinking and Bhutanese way of governance could make a little bit of contribution in some interconnected areas of international discussion, such as climate change, social division, well-being and happiness, and I must say it comes to my mind because media is suffused with it, weaponization and conflict. So in these 4 or 5 areas, perhaps the way we govern ourselves in this country could make some contribution. The regulation of climate change here, I don't mean law, but I mean the impact human beings make in this country, locally has taken place through preservation of forest that has also compromised I must say with honesty, the livelihood of the farmers, because the amount of land devoted to forest, for agriculture and livestock has diminished over time in favor of forestry. I think the gentle slope we saw in terms of temperature rise over the last 30 years and the maintenance of river volume roughly at the same level, but for Thimphu, I think local reasons apply rather than climate change, because upstream there is too much urbanization and it is sucking up all the streams are diverted to drinking, car washing, and so on and so forth. So this is how Bhutan has regulated climate change and softened the impact, but little. So I think this is one way we could say, we could enter the discussion. Second thing is on the community and social sources of welfare that does not require so much income and material living standard to achieve the same level of well-being and happiness. So I come down to summarize my 2 points. One, for happiness and well-being, not only for ecological services, which are emphasized by scientists and economists quite a lot, but the ecstatic experience of human being on an hourly, daily basis with nature is leveling up happiness and well-being. And the second is that even if you do not have money, you are not driven to a great deal of concern about security in your life. And that is because of the dense network of relationship between human beings in a village. So you rely on that instead of saving up so much money. But that is also a little bit under threat, I must say, with honesty. So community and social network and the access on a daily, hourly basis to experiences with nature, these two support well-being and happiness in Bhutan, though there are changes. And these two things then drive down human desire for accumulation of material, and that further softens the urge for careless industrialization and GDP growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dashu. Do we have some more questions? I'll take two. Okay, Lindsay and another. Yeah. So we'll go with Lindsay and then next.
I'll just speak out rather than use the microphone. I actually found Dr. Berkwhite's question to be perhaps most relevant to Kusang, your experience in the UNFCCC process. And I'm wondering if, thank you, I'm wondering if you might be willing to speak to that.
Okay, I'll take last question and then I'm happy to respond to that. Lindsay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So my question is about compatibility between I'm Daria Baklan from High School of Economics, Moscow, Russia. So my question is about compatibility of sustainable development concept and National Growth Index of Bhutan. So this concept of sustainable development was highly criticized by some scholars nowadays. And they consider this concept ineffective since 1970s. We see that it indeed didn't, make an effect that was supposed to make in terms of environmental protection, unlike the Bhutanese approach. So what is your perception on that? could Bhutanese approach be used as a tool to rethink the concept of sustainable development, or even to replace the concept of sustainable development, although it includes the goal number 13, which is specifically focused on climate change? Can we use Bhutanese approach to modify, evolve, or even replace sustainable development concept? Thank you.
Thank you very much on that. So, Tashu, would you like to take that next?
Thank you. To be very brief, I understand your word sustainable development is being used in a much broader way to include the SDGs. I think the SDGs and GNH is compatible. Compatible in a very broad way, but there is little bit of underemphasis under sustainable development on psychological and community relationship, which are intangible things really. So that is one small point I like to observe on SDGs. Second small point on sustainable development, sustainability rather than SDGs, is that the trade-off between the present and the future generation for a bundle of goods is really a sort of a material trade-off. You need to achieve equilibrium between supply and demand at every point in time. That is just material, but hidden behind it, of course, are the consumers or the human beings. I would like a little more prominent role for what purpose is the equilibrium being maintained? The equilibrium must have some relationship with well-being and happiness. So that one could be fleshed out a little more, I thought. But anyway, I think the sustainable development diversified formation and construction of the ideas runs till 2030, and we need to already think how we will renew that and broaden it and deepen it. And I think we could contribute to that. I'm already thinking of that little bit because I was not part of that earlier. So but the problem is when such things are come up for discussion, the person who sits on the table is foreign ministry diplomats. And there is some limitation in that.
Sorry, I'll add on to that. Now, when you talk of any international negotiation, be it SDG goals or climate change, as a small country, as far as possible, we like to, sell our ideas, our philosophy, particularly, gross national happiness, as much as we like to do it. But when it comes to a broader level, our small countries are, pushed a little bit behind. There are so many powerful, countries. For example, particularly, I can share one example at the FAO's food security. Now, we try to get as a member to that, as an independent, and if you see who are sitting there, it's all US, UK, Europe, Brazil, Argentina. That's how it actually revolves around. So, in particular, in the process, I think small country as a nation, it's quite difficult for us to pursue our own, ideology or stand. We are governed by certain rules and procedures, which I will pass it to Kunjang. She will actually maybe more in detail.
Last, thank you very much. We are 9 minutes past lunchtime, so So I'll first provide maybe 1 minute concluding remarks from our panelists, if there's any burning, whatever, that concluding remarks that we have. Otherwise, then I'll close the session.
I just want to say one thing.
Last.
I think it's more for our young lawyer students. I think this. I think the framework for GNH is slightly broader now. We use 9 domains, not 4 pillars and so on and so forth. But when the policies were drawn up, it was 4 pillars, as you know. So please bear that in mind. But for the law school, really, I think there is once again, unlike GNH, in your own field, there is really a great opportunity for you to explore. How does practice concept of law changes? If you take happiness as a major criterion, this is a very interesting problem which HRH has posed to all of you, but I cannot see any result coming out so far. So that is very challenging, I am sure. Our laws and policies are getting more and more influenced by the mainstream just now. Nothing wrong with that, nothing really wrong with that, but in some areas there may be superiority in the laws which come down from Buddhist principles, and if you can explicate it more, flesh it out more, taking things as compassion and happiness as its center, that would be very interesting. Even if you do not, even if you do not formulate as laws, at least as a part of your thinking here. It's my first time, it's such an impressive building, but you have to match it with little more actions. Thank you very much.
I'll take about a minute just to speaking from the farming perspective at the local sites. One thing I want to share here
Tasho, before you go, there is also questions, so maybe from the virtual participant. I thought Tasho could take up that as Tasho gives the concluding remarks. Tasho, if I may read it out. Climate change governance and implementation requires whole of government and whole of society approaches. How are we organized to do justice to address impacts of climate change? How successful we have been? So I thought, since we are talking about the society, community on the ground, I thought this is very relevant, Latasha. Thank you very much.
Let me put it this way. In terms of adopting, laws and policies, I think we are super, particularly passing those, regulations. That's great. But we have some hitches, particularly when it comes to implementation part. But when you talk of implementation hitches, it's not limited in Bhutan. I've seen across. It's something challenges. But having said that, in comparison to other countries, I would say that Bhutan has done fairly good. And it can be seen from the projects that we have access from JEV, from GCF, compared to any others. So there may be limitations, but I would say compared to others, we are much, much in better shape. But only where we require to do is more of paying attention with the focal agency of these conventions, focal agency of these financial mechanisms. If they can come together regularly, and meet and discuss before they go and represent country, I think that will add much value to what we are already doing on that. So that's probably, I'll leave it to that. On the second note, I was speaking about from the farming perspective. At the local site, when you do an investment or action, many aspects, from the farming perspective, it's not about biodiversity or land degradation or climate change. What they want to see is how they can improve their livelihood, how they can restore the damaged environment. They don't care much which part of the agency provides funding. that actually issue is at the bureaucracy level, trying to divide the cake here and there. So if we can, as I said, the focal agencies can come together regularly on basis, if not, biannual, at least, meet before they go to the conventions, I think we can make a huge difference. And this is a limitation, not only here. A case in point I will say is, there are a lot of opportunities availing this enabling fundings from GCF or JEF. In many countries, these are not really utilized. And this is an opportunity, but why they are not utilized? Because there is not really good coordination or communication among the key stakeholders or the focal person. So I would say that if we improve that, we can be much, much ahead of any other countries that are accessing. It's mostly now be on a competitive basis as we graduate from LDC. Thank you.
Last thank you, Dashola. So my colleague Sonam tells me that he was very clear in his presentation and doesn't want to come in and also doesn't want to be between lunch and you. So let me wrap up and also address Lindsay's question. On the question of taking GNH to international level, I think Bhutan has done that on different various level of, different dimension, I would say. Firstly, at the UN Assembly itself, as you are aware, March 20 is International Day of Happiness, and also Bhutan is sponsoring the Resolution of Happiness, which also says that towards holistic approach to development. So that's at the UN General Assembly level. Under the UNFCCC per se, Bhutan being member of the UNFCCC, the legal obligation, everything actually it's founded on our climate change policy, constitution, legislation, which are founded on the GNH pillars and principles. So as this reporting goes to the international forum, as these are being discussed, for instance, our nationally determined NDC's contributions, these are discussed at the regional level, national level, and then ultimately they reported to the UNFCCC forum. So this is how we contribute and discuss and share our practices and also the GNH pillars on the reporting. Under the negotiation, Bhutan negotiates as part of LDCs, and Bhutan right now is leading the LDC group on the Article 6, which is the carbon trading, capacity building group, LDC smooth transition, and also the global stocktake. These are all important agenda. And as we lead and negotiate, these are founded again on the GNH pillars and our constitution and policy and so on and so forth. So that's where we do. And here, a special mention of Karuna Foundation. They've been supporting our delegates in participating that and ensuring that the broad and effective representation is there. And I would like to thank Eric and Lindsay on that one. And again, on the SDGs, which is very much relevant in context of GNH, right? So Bhutan has already submitted our second voluntary national report to the high-level political forum in the UN, and it speaks to our sustainable consumption, production, climate change, and water, and so on and so forth. So that's how different dimension that we speak on and also share experiences on GNH. I'll leave it there, and I'm once again very humbled to be moderating this session. Thank you very much, my distinguished panelists, and also a special mention of my distinguished participants. You all have been really great and patient participants, and thank you very much. And my request to the organizer to adjust the timing, whatever we took from the next session. I'm sorry about that, so that we don't eat the lunch timing. Thank you very much.